Good morning. Good to see everybody. Hi, Zena. Great. Well, hopefully the other coaches jump on here pretty soon. So we've got a lot to cover.
Talking about hills today.
Yeah, today is
Hill celebration day.
Hill. Can you get in here? I like you to be close by when we have these calls. I need emotional support. Good to see everybody. We're talking about hills, everybody's favorite topic. I feel like hills are probably the thing that I have like the greatest like love-hate relationship with in running. And I feel like for most people, they kind of feel the same. You get better, you get fitter.
They never get easier.
The hills just stay the same.
They stay hard.
They're always tough. We're hoping to break it down, talk about why we do hills, the different kinds of hill training that we do. All this stuff is really integral. If you're a trail runner, if you're an ultra runner, if you're a 5K runner, if you're a marathon runner, if it's your first day of running ever, this stuff is super, super important. You will almost never not encounter a hill. Even my Midwest athletes, I'm looking at some of them right now. They do encounter hills. They might be on the treadmill. They could be small. It could be a 2% grade. But at least, you know, you're going to feel it. I feel it. I feel those 2% grades. So I'm sure you guys do as well.
Yeah, like the end of a 50 miler when you have like just like the slightest incline up to the finish line.
I always think about the Aspen Backcountry Marathon, which is a really awesome race out here.
You basically finish on a hill stride.
Well, the finish line is like that annoying uphill.
Yeah.
But if you do this side where it starts on Sunnyside and then you go up the Rio Grande, you have like that 4% uphill for like 2.5 miles all the way to the finish. And when you're tired, it's
not that fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some of the stuff here.
Why do we do hill strides?
Yeah. So I think like the most, probably prominent or frequent way that we all see hills in our training is going to be when we're doing hill strides. This is like one of our most important, like uses of the hill for training adaptation. One, we always start athletes on a hill doing speed work before we start them on the flats because the hill reduces impact forces, so it reduces the likelihood of injury. That is one of the most important factors, and that's going to come up over and over again as we kind of get into some of the other workouts that athletes do. That hill, you're closer to the ground, so it reduces impact forces.
For the same amount of energy you're putting out, there's less impact. So the ground is like coming up to meet you.
Yeah, exactly.
But your output stays the same.
Well, more or less, right? Because you do have some gravity, and the resistance of the hill does demand us to increase our effort, and that's why the hills feel so hard. But for that given effort, because you are closer to the ground and for the reasons that you mentioned, the impact forces are reduced. So it's a lot safer for athletes to start doing speed work on the hill. 20-second strides are pretty much the standard. I think that gives athletes just enough time to ramp up your speed and then hold kind of that higher end effort, which is great. And, these are typically what I would consider to be Vo2 Max efforts. I mean, they're basically the hardest you can go without losing form. Vo2 Max efforts are great for athletes of all ages, from our older, more masters runners right down to beginner runners. They're going to help when you work on your top end. It helps to build economy. And these 20-second hill strides also help to build strength. We tend to, I think across the board with all the coaches, use 20 seconds more than 30 seconds because 30 seconds, it's a lot. Like just add that extra 10 seconds and you know how much harder these are. We start to get into,
It feels like a year.
yeah,
to
and we
me.
start to get into like more fatigue resistance, and you can get a lot more tired quickly over the course of 4x20 seconds, 4x30 seconds. That difference, it can lower output levels. And on these, especially the 20-second strides, we're really looking to maximize output levels the entire time. We're really trying to push those outputs. Sarah, you had some really great notes on this. Just some reminders for athletes doing hill strides. Do you want to, why don't you just fill us in on those?
Sure. Yeah. So thinking about that, that maximum output that we're trying to maximize the output, that's why we have that 6 to 8% grade, because it allows you to do that output without either having too high of a cadence or too low of a cadence. And so it's, which allows you to have like the proper running form. So it like really is that sweet spot. So there's a reason that we pick that number. It's not arbitrary. And then a reminder that you want to be resting between each hill. So you should be recovering, jogging down the hill and getting your heart rate down before you go into that next hill. And you're easing into the hill and having that maximum output at the top of the hill, not full sprint, like right at the bottom of the hill. You want to like make it as natural as possible, and really to be focusing, think about power, like that output, that power thing instead of speed. You're not trying to focus on how quick your feet are going as much as you're trying to focus on the strides are powerful. So those were my only notes, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you did a great job of highlighting the importance of that hill grade. And I think we have maybe a slight bit of wiggle room on either side. Like if you're on a 5% graded hill, don't stress. If you're on like a 9%, or maybe like the top of your hill is 10%, like don't stress about that. But we really want to avoid like 12% and beyond, because that's we're working on a completely different like skill set than when we get into steep hills. And like Sarah mentioned, this is all about speed. This is all about power. You might not have you might not be nailing 100 strides per second. Like your cadence could slow down a little bit on these, because we are trying to get so much power. We're trying to build strength. We're trying to get that top end speed at the top of the hill. I mean, you should really be breathing heavily and trying to catch your breath. And it's okay to like have to take a couple seconds to like reorient yourself.
I get full hands on knees.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. And I take a few seconds at the top, and then I like really slowly jog down, and I don't start the next interval. And I do these at least 2 times a week, just like everybody else. So it's like, you start to practice these, and like, don't be afraid of that feeling where you can't catch your breath. That's what we're looking for on these. We really need to maximize those output levels. It's huge. We're building strength in a very safe way. And that strength eventually, as you start to develop a foundation in this stuff, really starts to translate well into your easy running, and then into doing intervals on the flats. So this is super, super fundamental if you can avoid those 12% and up grades, because we'd be working on a very different skill set, more specific to maybe a race that you're doing or something like that. And Sarah, also, just to reiterate, I really liked the emphasis on easing in and finishing strong. We really want to like ramp these up.
You don't want to start hot and fade. That's what we don't want to do that, because we're really trying to prioritize those top end ideal biomechanics, right? Because the faster you're running, the more efficient it forces your form to get. And we're not trying to teach our bodies how to fade and lose form and break down.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's get into what we're all here for, probably, is a little bit on like how to improve on these. And how to improve on hills in general, because we're all encountering hills on our daily runs.
So not hill strides, like the actual concept of non-flat surfaces.
Yeah, or I don't know, maybe I don't. There's so many little things to this. All right, we'll stick to the format here. So one of the most important things I think, and I've seen this in other literature out there in the running world, how to improve at running hills. One of the things that you can do is improve your overall strength as an athlete. Strength training in moderation. We're talking about functional strength that works for running, that's single leg focused. A few key sessions a week, doesn't have to be more than probably like 8 to 10 minutes twice a week. It could be, some people, they prefer to do a little bit more, but I'd say probably not more than 20 minutes. Those key sessions are hugely important for improving your output levels, and they're building slow twitch muscle fibers that don't tire as quickly when we're running hills. And that kind of thing over time, over many months, is going to help create better running economy, and it's going to make you feel more confident on those hills. The real key to doing the strength work is making sure that it's functional and that it builds slow twitch muscle fibers. It's great when we do our 20-second hill intervals and we're fast off the line and we're really pushing up the hill. And a lot of that is really fast twitch. And that's great. We need that too to tackle hills. But when we're talking about sustained climbs, when we're talking about hills on our long runs and during races, it's our slow twitch muscle fibers that are really fundamental to keeping us from, fatiguing. So if you're not doing strength, refer to Coach Megan. She's done 2 really great strength calls for us. There are also some shorter, more, I think, fundamental or key kind of like workouts like mountain legs or speed legs that you can also do, which are like 3 to 8 minutes long. I personally use those quite a bit.
Huge fan, particularly of step ups, because what that does is that really breaks down the key movement of moving uphill and strengthens those muscles. So yeah.
Sorry, just grabbing a sip of water here.
And that's something that like every athlete can and should be doing. Like, you don't need special equipment. You can use your front porch steps. You can use, like we've done it, like using the car. You just open the door of your car, put your foot under the seat, and you practice that movement of a step up. You can do it on a picnic table at the trailhead, on a park bench. Like, this is not something that you're going to have a hard time finding an excuse that I'll believe in terms of why you didn't get your mountain legs done.
And I mean, especially those single leg step ups. I mean, they're just they burn, and they're supposed to. And then I think over time, you probably want to add weight to those too, but they're easy. You can get them done like at the park where you parked your car. You can get them done like on the steps in front of your house when you walk in the door, and just making sure that you stay consistent with that. Gosh, I can really think of probably no workout that is as important as the single leg step up.
Yeah. If you only had time to do one thing, which you don't, that would be the thing to do.
All right, let's move on to improving running economy. Just the basics. Running economy is the amount of energy it takes to go a given pace. This is related specifically to your biomechanics. It's how efficient you are utilizing oxygen as a runner. Easy aerobic volume over time is one of the most fundamental ways of improving economy. Like, you go out, you do your 40-minute run around town, like you're stacking a brick in favor of improving your running economy and provoking adaptation that over time is going to make you more efficient. I mean, simply doing the act of running is one of the most profound things that you can do. Strength training helps to improve economy as well, because when we're stronger, we get more output out of each stride. And then kind of the other element to improving economy is, running higher output workouts. We're either doing hill workouts, we're going to do strides on the flats, or we're doing higher output and longer intervals, something like 10K effort intervals. Really any faster running. So it can be 1 hour effort running. It could, anything that like really gets you into your best form, ask you to focus on being smooth, that kind of stuff is going to improve your economy over time. And this isn't stuff that's going to, take effect in 1 or 2 workouts. I mean, it can for some people. Everybody is different, but usually this is stuff that's happening behind the scenes over months, hundreds of strides done, many workouts completed, and all of a sudden you're becoming more efficient. And the whole thing is we're just defining those neuromuscular pathways. We're building those pathways out. So every time we get out there, it's, your muscle memory, you feel smoother, you're syncing up with your best possible form. And it just takes time, that compounding, consistency principle is just really important on these.
Yeah. And I think that like we'll frequently see athletes that, if they struggle on hills, they'll either like they'll swing wildly one way and try to do a ton of hills in their training. They'll try to, and they'll end up like, if they're trail runners, they'll end up hiking a lot during runs, or for road runners, they'll just end up like drilling hills past the point of it being productive. The best way to get better at hills over time is to just get better at running generally, and don't overemphasize the specific skill of hills.
Totally. Kristen, do you want to chime in a little bit on form and kind of running by feel on the hills and what that should, feel like, look like for athletes?
Yeah, usually with athletes who are just starting with microcosm and maybe who have never run before, I like to tell them to focus more on your form going uphill instead of just like going balls to the wall and sprinting the uphill. You don't have to do that. Go as fast as you can without letting your form break down, I think is a good rule of thumb. Sometimes I do this with faster athletes as well, if they're like kind of starting to get in their head a little bit about how to run these or how fast to run these. I like to have them take a step back and not overthink it and just get to the top of the hill with good form. And just simplifying it as much as possible, because it is really easy to overthink it and to overanalyze every little thing. So by simplifying it and asking athletes to focus on their form, they actually end up going faster over time.
Yeah, I totally agree. What are some like form tips, especially for athletes who are just like, maybe doing a few rolling hills, or they have some climbs on like their easy runs? What should they be focusing on?
Yeah, I think one good rule of thumb is to like lean your upper body, to match the grade of the hill. That's really important, especially if you're doing like really steep stuff. Doesn't really matter as long as you're leaning forward and like engaging your glutes. I think that's really important. So those two things: lean forward, engage your glutes, keep your eyes up. Don't just like stare at your feet the whole time, because that's no fun. But those are probably my 3 tips.
Yeah, I like the head up and like eyes up the hill tip a lot. I think I'm the worst at this, because when I start grinding on the hill, I totally like my posture suffers. And I know I've been at a lot of races. I've seen many athletes do the same thing. And so when you are, leaning forward and matching your upper body to the grade, it really is important to keep your head up and your eyes up the hill, because when you start to slump, you restrict air to your diaphragm. And so it can become really hard to get enough oxygen in. And so your perceived effort can actually go up significantly. And like, we're already on a hill, our perceived effort is automatically going to be higher when we're on a hill. So we want to try to do all the little things we can to make it feel easier and more tolerable, really more tolerable. I think about it as like hill tolerance. But so keep your head up. That keeps your airway clear, allows you to take bigger breaths. I find that to be really, really important. Think about your habits. Try to be aware of the things that maybe you aren't doing right. I think particularly this kind of comes back to what Kristen said about like those short strides, being really relaxed, making sure that your cadence is really high on your easy runs when you're going up those hills. Hills are like tough enough. So if you can smile, it'll make your whole body relax more. If you can just like think about those little cues that kind of keep you chiller when you're grinding up the hill, it's really important. And another thing I think goes along with that is like, just don't worry so much about your pace. Like, you're going up a hill, you're going to be slower. You have to just get comfortable with that fact. The hillier your route, the slower your pace is going to be on Strava. Like all of those things that kind of get through our heads when we're running, like, oh, this is a hilly route. It's taking me all day. Oh, I'm so slow. My overall pace isn't fast enough. Like these are all the things that happen to every athlete of every level. And so we really have to just get comfortable. Like, all right, I'm just going to go as easy as I can. I'm going to try to be as smooth as I can on this hill. I'm going to like make sure I keep my head up and I keep my lean forward. And then I'm just going to like know that my heart rate's going to be a little bit higher. There's going to be some, increased resistance and some fatigue that are going to happen. But, I'm going to put that work in and then hopefully recover on the other side of that hill.
Something I'll really have athletes practice is like TJ said, we really want to avoid bending over at the waist. We want to have like a full natural forward lean starting with your ankles. So this isn't on a hill. I'll have them do it on a flat surface, but practice falling into your stride. So I'll have the athlete just lean from their ankles as far forward as possible. And right before you feel like you're about to fall over, then you step into your stride. And that's how far you should be leaning. That's how you start to use your body as inertia. You start to harness free energy instead of trying to generate all the energy yourself with your legs. And a lot of people, that will really surprise them how much more they need to lean forward.
Totally. And, most of that move, like our movement on the hill is actually horizontal. That's why there's such a high correlation between, good running economy and how well we run on hills. And so when you don't match your upper body to the grade, think about where gravity is taking you, right? It's all your momentum is going back down the way that you came, down to the bottom of that hill instead of forward where you're going. And so, maybe even exaggerating that forward lean a little bit can be really helpful. And like Kristen mentioned earlier, when you lean forward, it helps you activate your posterior chain. Mm-hmm. The big muscle groups tire out less. They don't tire as quickly. And when we're not leaning forward, we overuse our lower legs, we strain our calves over and over again. And those muscles, they tire a lot quicker than our hamstrings and our glutes and our quads.
Yeah. So like athletes that are experiencing like plantar issues, tendon issues, lower leg, foot, like fatigue, soreness, tightness, something that we really look for is if you feel like you're overusing your calves, that actually means you're probably underusing your butt. Yeah. And you need to work on a form shift. It's all about harness the butt.
Use the booty.
Yeah.
All right. So cool. All of that applies really to, your easy runs, your long runs and racing, how do we incorporate hills? Kind of what are the fundamentals there? So we've grasped that, right? Like we're working hard, we're progressing through our training. Now it's time to start considering some longer intervals. So we can really start to, just get better at going uphill and start feeling more confident. They're kind of like good training. There are a lot of tiers to it. You start with your 20-second strides, you're running easy on your, regular runs around around your neighborhood during the week. And then you're starting to progress. Maybe you're thinking about like a race, something's coming up in your training, you have a goal. And so your coach is going to naturally progress you. And so that's when we start to do longer hills. And that's anything like 30 seconds, I think, to 3 minutes is about where most athletes are at when we start to do workouts on a hill that are longer. And you will see, and we'll get into this a little bit more as we talk about race-specific adaptations, because there are some really fun or not so fun workouts that we do have athletes do that involve longer hills and tempos on hills and things like that. But we're creating a foundation here, and it really starts with like those 30-second to 3-minute hills. So like the second component to getting better at hills is improving vertical velocity. And that's kind of where these longer hill intervals, start to be really important. For everybody at Microcosm, these hill intervals are usually done like at a moderately hard to hard or maybe 1 hour effort a lactate threshold effort. So these are like pretty high intensity. The reason why we usually give a pretty large range for effort is because hills are a lot safer than running on the flats, right? Like, remember going back to thinking about how close we are to that grade, especially when we're leaning forward, we can really start to feel how close we are to that hill and how little impact forces there are. So that gives us the ability to run those workouts a little bit harder. And when we run them harder, we are developing more strength, we're developing, you know, more fatigue resistance, and we might be hopefully starting to mimic a little bit more of how we would ideally want to attack these hills at a race, you know, trying to be more focused, maybe more purposeful, and to sustain those efforts for longer. These are a great way. I think especially the 1 to 3 minute intervals are really great for athletes who are coming back from an injury. Maybe they're not quite ready to do like fast flat speed. But we do want to start working on those aerobic adaptations, start getting into other energy systems and working on those. The hill is just going to be so important for that. And when we extend those intervals, you know, that resistance extends too. So we get all of that muscular strength and endurance that we need on race days. And that also really trickles down to easy runs and stuff too. So remember, it's all about progressing. If you're not quite like at 3 minute hills regularly in your training, that's cool. We're building a baseline. It starts with 15-second or 20-second hills, lots of them over time to build economy, to build a solid foundation. And then we're getting into the more, intense workouts. Zoe, talk to me a little bit about some of the, I don't know, like race specific workouts that you might give to athletes, kind of like, I don't know, peaking in their build.
Yeah.
They've kind of already done like, I don't know, tougher workouts like 5 by 3 minute hills. Like,
That's
what's
like my
the
favorite
next progression?
If like that would be my desert island workout. Like if I could only do one workout for the rest of my life. Actually, well, man, that's an impossible choice. I love 5 by 3 minute hills. I love giving that to intermediate and advanced athletes because it's such a fun, powerful, short, but super effective workout. Another one I really love is the Hill Beast, which is one that was kind of pioneered by David Roche at SWAP, which is kind of an ideal pre-race workout. And the typical way that works, though, like we obviously tailor it depending on the athlete's volume, is for really advanced athletes, we'll do like a 2 to 3 mile warm up, and then you do a 10-minute hill, an 8-minute hill, a 6-minute hill, a 4-minute hill, and a 2-minute hill. Sometimes for more intermediate athletes, I'll either have them start with the 8 or 6-minute hill and then finish with the 2-minute hill, because just not everyone is at the point where they can really sustain a 10-minute hill at the output level that's still helpful for their form and for their energy systems. But that one's really nice because especially like if you're going into a longer, like if you're doing a 100-mile race or a steeper 50K or 50-mile race, that really helps you kind of lock into that. Like you just can't go that hard uphill for 10 minutes. Like you're going to have to tailor your output. And so it kind of helps you learn how to do that and still move uphill. And because it's a cascading ladder, meaning you get like the intervals get shorter, it incentivizes still pushing harder even through fatigue. So it's a really good one for fatigue resistance. It's a really good one for aerobic endurance. It's a really good one for strength. And then I have the athlete just do like an easy rundown in between the intervals. Another thing I really like to do is using hill intervals and strides in combo workouts. So I'll have an athlete either do like, maybe I'll have them do 6 by 2 minutes fast or 10 by 1 minute fast for a more advanced athlete. I'll have them do some amount of speed to get them tired. And then I'll either have them do hill intervals or hill strides, which is going to force you to do high-end output after your fatigue, which makes it easier for you, like in a race scenario, makes it easier for you to run uphill even when you're tired.
That's great mentally.
Sometimes, or sometimes I'll reverse it, which is a little less common because I think that not everyone is quite at the level where this is helpful. So you're more likely to see hills after, because again, of that reduction of impact forces. Sometimes I'll have athletes do like 5 by 3 minute hills, and then I'll have them do a tempo, which what that does is, again, we're using the hills to tire you out. And then with something like a tempo or like a flat speed set afterwards, whether it's strides, 1 minute intervals, or a tempo, that forces your body to get good at maintaining high output and high turnover even after you're tired. So basically we smash your legs up and then we force you to do something uncomfortable.
Oh, totally. And I think some of just like those combo workouts can be great at bridging the gap between, I've done a lot of those 3-minute hills, and, how am I going to provoke more race specific adaptation? Well, we're bringing in those combo workouts, right? Like we're doing a hill workout, and then maybe we'll do strides after, or we'll do a shorter hill workout. We'll do a shorter tempo after, because I know that every athlete who's done a trail race specifically, there are points at the race where it's like, oh, we've done all this vert and now I had to run. And I was like, I just couldn't run anymore because I'd done all that vert. And like, so building that fatigue resistance, being able to still move efficiently on the flats, or run downhill well, all of this stuff helps to kind of maximize that for you guys on race day. Another thing that I think works great is the hill ladders for maybe intermediate and, becoming advanced athletes. And like Zoe mentioned, the hill beast, that's a crazy tough workout. We're not going to give that to very many athletes, but like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 minute hill ladders, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1 minute hill ladders are really effective, because we get that like extra long interval, and then we kind of can come down the ladder, or we start with the long interval and we come down the ladder. Maximizing those efforts, even when we're fatigued, can be super, super effective at introducing longer intervals at a higher intensity, and just getting comfortable there. And so much of this is, as we'll talk about in the next couple of questions, is just like developing a comfort, being pretty uncomfortable. Hills, at least for everybody that I know, are not very fun, and hill workouts, these are a time to, I think, work on your mental game and start to, discover that you're capable of doing hard things, and try to maybe hold on to some of that and use those feelings to then visualize how it will feel later in races, when inevitably you will feel very uncomfortable and very tired, and we still need to be able to run. And so we can draw on some of these workouts as like, oh yeah, like I remember that fifth 3-minute interval, I was able to still push. Like I can still run, even when I'm deep in the suck and late in a race.
Yeah, I did a really long format workout this week that was 5 by 6 minutes by 3 minutes. And then I ended the workout with 5 by 30-second hills, and that just about ended me. And I was texting my coach afterwards, describing the specific ways in which I felt ended by that workout. And he was like, yeah, the whole goal with this was to scrape the bottom of the physiological barrel, which we typically, like, we don't want to do every workout. That's not the goal of every workout, but it needs to be the goal of an occasional workout, particularly like if you're training for a more intense effort, just like really getting an athlete super tired, pretty wrecked, and then forcing them to do 30 seconds. Like 30 seconds has never felt so long in my life.
I think I had about 4 of those workouts leading up to CCC.
Yeah,
and every single one of them, I would just get back to the car, just like I'd seen God, like, oh my God, can I even drive home today?
I can't drive or operate heavy machinery after this one.
I remember I did the beast workout on 15% grade, prescribed. This wasn't something that I was just like, I need to go steeper. This was prescribed beast on 15% grade, followed by a 3-mile tempo. And I was just like, oh my God, I might need the rest of the week off.
I may never play the piano again.
All right, let's talk a little bit. We got like a good question here about hills for beginners. And this is something that just comes up all the time in my own coaching. And I know that it does for all the other coaches too. So as a beginner, how do I incorporate running hills into my training? Running up even short hills really takes my breath away and makes it tough to keep my heart rate low. Sarah, why don't you chime in on this first? You had some great notes on this.
So, first thing is, yeah, when you're starting anything, it is new and it's challenging, and it takes some getting used to. And so don't turn away from that, and don't avoid hills or only run flat routes. The only way that you're going to get better at hills is by running on hills. And so, just make sure that you're not being scared away because it's challenging, that you see that as, a skill to gain and something to work on. And so to that end, you can incorporate more hills or longer hills or steeper hills as you get comfortable. So plan a route that has, a couple small hills at first. And then when you get comfortable with that, then, that hill that you've driven past a bunch of times and thought that it looked kind of intimidating, maybe add that to a run, and just slowly add more challenges, and you'll, get more confident over time, hopefully, is the idea. And then the other thing is just when hills are part of your everyday run, you're not taking them like hill strides. So don't get to the bottom of the hill and think about I'm going to take this hill, I'm going to power this hill. It's I'm going to grind out this hill in the middle of my long run, because it's a totally different approach to the hill than what we're going for when you're specifically doing hill strides. So I think that's an important difference.
100%. And that kind of goes back to the form tips that Kristen mentioned earlier, where we're just trying to be as relaxed as we can. And if you need to hike, that's fine. Hike by feel. If it feels like your heart rate is really starting to climb, you've got pretty short, your breath rate is really increasing and you're having, some trouble getting some oxygen in, feel free to just start power hiking. I mean, that is an integral part of what we do as runners at every level. So, don't be shy about that, and don't worry, that's not a referendum on you and your abilities. We're all out there hiking. It's just part of the process.
Killian hikes. He hikes a ton.
He's a great hiker.
He's the goat.
Glutes.
A lot of glute on that man.
Yeah. So I really like to consider and think about hills as kind of like this bonus aerobic work too for athletes. Don't worry that your heart rate's going up. If you can see the top of the hill, that's a great hill to practice running up and letting your heart rate come up a little bit. If it's a hill that maybe you can't see the top of, or this is a really long hill, run for as long as it feels comfortable, and then hike the rest, and then run, down the other side. And over time, you start to be able to run more of that hill and more of that hill.
Yeah. So if you look at kind of the Norwegian and more European kind of older school way of training, you would have people who would even elite athletes would walk hills, which is kind of one way of really ensuring that you keep your heart rate super, super low. We're actually, starting to have a more nuanced understanding of physiology and understanding that our bodies don't work in discrete energy systems, right? It's not like you're suddenly easy, now you're running hard. There's a lot more gray area. So we're actually seeing a lot more push. This is kind of what I've been really trying to get athletes to do more of recently. Even if you're not running purely easy on the hill, that's okay. Run a little bit more moderate, as long as you're able to get your heart rate back down to baseline. Like Sarah said, we don't want to charge the hill. We don't want to go so hard on the hill that we're not able to get our heart rate back down into the aerobic easy zone. But it's actually going to be more helpful for you long-term if you do start to kind of push yourself to run on the hill rather than walk.
And I think there is a caveat to that, and that's if you feel tired, or you've done a big workout maybe the day before, it might be less advantageous in those moments to let your heart rate come up, and you might want to consider, maybe walking more of that hill or going even easier. This is all stuff that, as athletes, we develop that awareness over time, and we're able to take what feedback our body is giving us in those moments, be all right, there are times on my easy Thursday runs after a workout that I'll walk a hill that I would normally totally crush on an easy run. And I think about everything in context. Like, I've just done a workout the next day. I feel pretty tired today. Like, I can tell my legs are heavier. So, I'm not going to stress myself on this. I'm going to walk that hill. I'm going to hike it. I'm going to keep my heart rate really low. But, maybe at other times, and I'm feeling a little bit better, I am going to stretch that effort. And it really is important, because I think, especially when it comes to race day and being ready for our races at every single level, right? We're racing because we want to see how well we can do. We want to, maybe if it's just trying to, can I even go this distance? Or, I'm trying to PR this distance, whatever it is, that's going to involve kind of stepping outside of ourselves for a little while and what's comfortable. And we can practice that in small doses. I think some of those steady paced hills during our easy runs can be really helpful for developing like an overall feel. And then that translates really, really well to races. So what, actually, Drew, you mentioned attitude was really important. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, if you could expand a little bit on that and talk to us, maybe from a beginner's perspective. I know hills are just so intimidating. What can we do, like, attitude wise, to maybe prepare ourselves for this stuff, or just hill intervals in general?
Yeah. So when I started at Microcosm, it's been like 21 months ago now. And really before that was a time in my life where anytime I came across hills, and I would consider myself a fairly experienced runner. But even then, like, I used words like, I hate them. They're terrible. Like, they're just like, I don't enjoy them. Anytime there's a run or a workout with a hill in it, I knew it and was dreading it and just didn't like it. And I think that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of, before even running a hill, knowing that it was going to be hard and knowing that I wasn't going to enjoy it, really kind of spiraled out of control, where I think I was making them harder than they needed to be, right? No one goes and runs hills and says that they're easy. Like, oh man, yeah, I just did this hill workout and I didn't sweat. I didn't breathe. I like everything fine. I slept through it, right? That's not how it works. And I think, if you're seeing and hearing a lot of more experienced runners or just people that are in your circle talk about how hills are difficult and hard, it can be really intimidating, and you can get intimidated and just not enjoy them, but just like avoid them, kind of like Sarah was saying. We don't want to avoid them. And so sometimes it helps to use different verbiage to understand, like, this is going to be difficult, but this is going to make me better. Like, I'm doing this to make myself stronger, and start using more positive talk, right? We talk about positive self-talk, but really kind of like using that for all workouts, but specifically hills, knowing that they can be challenging. And kind of changing the way you think about these, especially as a beginner, so that it's just a little bit more accomplishable, right? They are difficult, right? They're challenging, but if you go into a workout thinking, I'm not gonna do these well because they're gonna hurt and I don't like the way they feel and all this negativity, then, I mean, odds are that's exactly how it's gonna go, right? And so embracing the challenge, embracing what you're set out to do, knowing that you're going to get better, all really has to do with that attitude and making sure that you're, on the right track.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like this is such an important component to all of this, and just training in broader strokes. I love when I see an athlete like putting a hilly race on their plan and then purposefully making every Saturday run hilly in order to kind of mimic the challenges of that race. I'm like, you know what? You're doing your homework. Like, you're owning this process, and you're going to set yourself up for, success at that race. I often feel like there's a challenge when an athlete puts a hilly race on their plan and then does a flat run every Saturday. And there's nothing wrong with flat runs. I love a good flat run, but if your race is hilly and you run flat and then you get on the hills, you're not going to feel prepared. You're going to get intimidated by it. Your attitude and your self-talk might shift, like Drew mentioned, and then you might have a really tough day out there. So make sure, like, I don't know anybody, like, I kind of like hills because I kind of like doing things to myself that feel hard and persevering through that. And I know a lot of runners kind of fall on that side of things. So they pick things that are purposefully hard. But there's no disillusionment. Like when you step up to 5 by 3 minute hills, or those are gonna just, that last minute of a 5 by 3 minute hill, it's gonna suck and it's gonna hurt and it's not gonna feel good, and your legs are gonna feel like jello, and you're pushing through that anyways. That's like, you're stacking huge bricks. You are investing in your long-term potential as an athlete. Every time you do that, you're, basically saying, I can do hard things, and here's how I, show myself that, and over time get comfortable being there and mimic some of the feelings that you might feel at the race. And that's so important. Another thing that I think is really important with these is when you have an athlete like Drew mentioned, who is like, I hate hills, and you see it in their training log all the time. Like, I suck at hills. I hate hills. I'm going to purposely tell that athlete, okay, you're going to say every day before you start your log entry, I love hills. And just like, you have to start every log entry, I love hills. And then over a few months, that person's perception of those hills actually changes. And it's like super annoying. And I'm going to nag them to be like, hey, you didn't start your log entry today with I love hills. Do you want to get better at hills? Like, it starts by shifting your attitude around these things. Like, I often fall into that category and can relate to Drew as somebody who just like doesn't feel like they're getting any faster on hills, and like doesn't feel like they've improved as an uphill runner after half a decade of working on hills. And it's just like, that's a BS that I tell myself. It's not true. And like, I have to shift my mindset around those things. And so it's like, every time I go out and do a hill workout, I don't have any disillusionment. I know this is going to suck and it's going to really hurt, but I'm like, I'm capable of doing this. I'm going to get so much out of this. Like, maybe I'll even fake a little smile out there, or I will smile because I like to do hard things and that makes me feel good, et cetera, and trying to just spin it as much as you can.
My first call that I was on, TJ, you told everyone, don't say you hate hills, say you love hills. Every time you do hills, you got to say you love it, even if you hate it, but say you love it and just like speak it into existence, and that'll eventually happen. And I've been doing it and it helped a little bit, but say you love it.
Yeah. Likewise, don't judge the run by how you feel on the uphills. Like, I think so often, like, I'll be running uphill and I'm like, man, I suck at running. This is so hard. I'm terrible. And then as soon as I'm running on flats, I'm like, oh, it was just because running uphill is objectively hard. So like, don't over index, like whatever feelings come up when you're running uphill, like that's maybe not a great time to pay too much attention to the voice in the back of your head.
Right.
It's just going to be hard. It's just going to feel harder, and that's normal. Like, so don't use that as a tool of self-judgment.
Remember Sarah's post, was it a bad run, or was it, hills?
Yeah.
Oh wait, it was hills. I recently had an athlete who did for maybe the second time all season, like a super hilly run, and then they got really, really sore after. And it's like, well, all that climbing, all that descending, that was really new on your body. Maybe ease yourself into those really steep days too, guys. Like we talked about, we're doing some hills during the week. We're doing some hills on the weekend. We're gradually introducing these stresses on our system. If we go out and do 5,000 feet of climbing on a Saturday, and we haven't done, maybe on our 6 mile run around the block, 400 feet of vert, just regularly, and then maybe a run with 3,000 feet of vert, and really worked up to that, we're going to feel destroyed by that. And that's really normal. So, gradually introduce these things to your system. Don't expect, if you're going to go hammer yourself, that you are going to recover quickly. It's just not going to happen. And that might actually be really risky.
Yeah, I would, and also just going from running very flat to very steep, like that's a big time we're going to start to see Achilles things pop
Lower leg
up.
issues.
Yeah,
too.
lower leg issues. So be really careful. Don't suddenly ramp up your vert like crazy. Yeah, that's just something to be aware of. Like, we'll see it with like, we'll have an athlete that lives in Kansas and they'll go on vacation to the Alps and they'll do hill avert, and lo and behold, Achilles issues will pop up, calf issues will pop up. Just be really, really careful about sudden huge swings in vert.
All right, let's continue on. We got 2 more questions to get through. We've got maybe 10 minutes. So I really want to make sure we get these in. This question is on hill reps. My question isn't about it's not about hill reps. Sorry. My question isn't about hill reps. Instead, it's on the incline for the rest of the run. So outside of hill reps, what should the incline of my runs be like? I live in Connecticut. I found on average that streets and paths are more rolling hills, whereas where I am now, everything is flatter or really steep and long. There are places I can go for long sustained climbs, but I wanted to know if on easy days or workouts focused on speed, what should I be doing? Should I be running on flatter terrain? And is that okay?
For speed, flatter terrain is ideal because you're going to get better high-end biomechanics. Some days I'll cue athletes to do things on rolling terrain for a different kind of adaptation, if they're training for a trail race or we just want to kind of shift up the stimulus a bit. What we really don't want people doing is speed workouts on turning a speed workout into a hill workout. Don't do that. We also just don't want people doing huge, massive amounts of vert during the week to the point that they're just hiking for their runs. Like if you need to power hike for like a couple of minutes or so in the context of a run, totally fine. What we kind of want to avoid during the week is like power hiking to a summit, running down kind of a deal. So that's just not the best training for running unless that's a race specific adaptation we've talked about and want to pursue.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it, Zoe. Speed work, flatter terrain. If your easy runs, just pure easy days are on rolling terrain, that's totally fine.
That's great.
And having some longer sustained climbs on your easy days are totally fine. I think especially for a more, intermediate to advanced athlete. But again, just check your effort, make sure that maybe like those more challenging, easy runs aren't causing you to overpower hike. And if you need to take more recovery, I would keep those runs flatter. Yeah, and I don't know, do you think that addresses, should I run hillier runs midweek or just on the weekend?
I mean, I think hilly runs are fine midweek. Again, speed sessions are going to be more impactful if they're flatter, unless, of course, I've cued you to do rolling terrain. Yeah, but I think, rolling terrain is fine.
Totally.
Hills, fine.
And I think particularly don't overthink the terrain thing. Don't make perfect be the enemy of good. I've had a lot of athletes with longer sustained tempos on hills and things like that, just really get into the weeds about the hill it goes downhill for a few minutes and then it goes back up. I'm like, that's fine, because I guarantee on race day it's going to be similar to that. It's hard anywhere to find, I don't know, a 20-minute sustained uphill. Don't worry about it being perfect.
We do have that in Carbondale though.
Well, we live in a valley. Not everybody lives in a valley. And
Come to our valley.
Perfect segue into our last question. How do we train for hilly races when you live in a flatter location? Kylie, you want to chime in on this? I haven't gotten a chance to ask you about any of these questions.
That's okay. One of the things I was going to say about the previous thing you were talking about is sometimes I will specify on my athlete's training plan, that I do actually want them to do a hillier run, etc. So if it's somebody that is a little bit more maybe confused, or maybe they purposely avoid hills, sometimes I will put that on the training plan. So just a side note there. But then
for people that are living in flat areas, I do have an athlete that is completely at sea level, no hills in sight, and did Trans Rockies actually.
Oh, that's epic. Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we use tread hills a lot. That is one of our main ways of getting in some hill work. And bleachers as well is another one, or like in parking garages, sometimes there's staircases, but essentially like getting really creative with some climbing, because there literally is no option for this person. And we also thinking about some training trips, sometimes for people that are completely at sea level, if there's anywhere nearby, like this person, we had them do a trip. They're in North Carolina, and then they went to, I think it was Asheville or something, and did a couple of training trips where they would get in some runs with hills there, so they felt a little bit more confident. So, you might be able to, I understand not everyone can swing that, but it might be a good strategy if it is an option for you.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point with that, Kylie, especially, if we're talking about like your A race, it's, Trans Rockies, right? Like that's a big week of a lot of back-to-back for maybe taking the time to just like, if it's a 3-hour drive on a Friday evening, get your run in on like hillier terrain, camp out, I don't know, make it like a fun weekend, and like talk with your coach, because we can always make that like a high stress concentration weekend, give you, a rest week on the week before and a down week after. So like you adapt and it's not as risky, but you do get some time like on the terrain. I think, Kristen, you mentioned this in the notes, but like tread hills are definitely your best friend if you live in a city. I've got a couple athletes who live in New York City and train for like Angels Crest 100 and like all of these Hurt 100, like crazy steep races. And just like after work, they just go to the gym and they run like on a 6% to 8% grade for an hour. Like they'll mix stuff up, and it really helps. That like treadmill double can be really helpful too. If you've got a treadmill at home and like you want to do your easy run around town, and then you just do like 20 or 30 minutes at like a 12% grade on the treadmill. Maybe you're hiking it a little bit. Maybe you're practicing, running, getting kind of comfortable on those grades. The most important thing there is you're using those muscle groups that you would use when you are actually like out there on race day on that steeper terrain. You're not going to be mimicking it perfectly, but you are going to be creating some of those adaptations that are really specific to the race that you're doing, and they're going to be really helpful. The other components of this, again, strength training. If we can get you going with some single-legged strength work, Megan Flanagan's strong and stable legs, David Roche's mountain legs. I mean, we don't need to go crazy with this. You don't need to hire a personal trainer necessarily that you go to every day to do this stuff. You just need to get like that 8 minutes of work in 2 times a week, do your step ups after 2 or 3 runs a week. Like that stuff, it actually really, really does help over time. The key, like with all of this, is just being consistent with it. Yeah, what do you think? Polls or no polls? Quick around the horn with the coaches to wrap it up.
I think it depends on the athlete, but I hate them.
Hates polls.
Don't like polls.
Kylie, polls or no polls?
Not on like hill workouts, but like yes, for long runs that might, and if you're going to plan on racing with them, I would use them.
Totally. Drew, polls or no polls in Arkansas? What do you guys like to do out there?
That'd be a big no. And if I'm ever registered for a race that would require them, you need to send help, because that's not me. It's someone's abducting my body.
It's identity theft.
Sarah, polls or no polls?
Well, I love polls, use them all the time. They're really great. They make me feel safe for wildlife too, because you can get big really fast. And yeah, I love them.
Kristen, polls or no polls?
It depends what you're training for.
That is the best answer.
First ever BQ with poles.
Oh my
That could be
God.
me. That's how much I love poles. Like, get your Lakey poles. I love them.
First ever Lakey sponsored athlete in the Berlin Marathon.
You'll see me out there. Those 1% graded uphills. Gotta get the upper body work going.
Heartbreak Hill powering up.
Poles are your friend in steep long races, especially later in those races. I think if you've got any ski history and you're used to using poles, consider them in your runs. They can be really, really helpful. I think particularly if you're doing long climbs. If your climbs are pretty short, they're just a pain. You're just going to be stowing them in your pack and taking them back out over and over, and it's not very efficient. But you know you're going to be hiking 30, 45 minutes, and upwards. Yeah, consider using them. I think that they can really help. Well, cool, guys. I feel like we have covered hills in their entirety, and we will. Yes, we love the downhill too. Believe me. We'll talk about that in a future call. Next week, we're going to be doing a rapid fire session, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about running downhill then. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the fall colors. Get out there and run. Bye.